We got a couple of guests here. Joining us from Fayetteville, North Carolina, is our good buddy Johnny Hunter. Hello, Johnny.
God blesses you. Greetings. It's good to see everybody.
It's nice to hear your voice, Johnny. And also joining us from Union City, California, is our good friend Walter Hoye. Hello, Walter.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
Well, we are just fine, and we are so happy to have you and Dr. Hunter joining us. Listen, when we put out MAFA 21, of course, the pro-aborts are claiming that we are lying about eugenics being the driving force behind abortion. Now the CDC has put out a document showing this incredibly disproportionate abortion rate among minorities, and I would argue that this confirms everything that we stated in MAFA. What about you, Johnny?
100%, Mark. Not only does it confirm it, but it actually shows it in some real solid data form. You know, when you start looking at places like New York, where that abortion rate is that high, you know, where they're, according to their own figures, they're putting it up to 80% and all that kind of craziness, you know it's bad. I tell you what I did notice, Mark, in this report. There are some figures that they manipulated ever so slightly, like the District of Columbia, for instance. When you start talking about the number of blacks, they got it set at 51%. All you got to do is 54%, 54.1. But if you go outside and stand in an abortion clinic in Washington, D.C., you will see more than 54% going in there. But the reason that figure is different, 10 years ago, they reported it differently. The way you can tell when they skew a couple of the figures is by what they put under other. Like for Washington, D.C., their other is at 21%. Most of the time, it's just single digit, 5.9, 7.3 point something, you know,
right.
Just a single digit. But it was so high in Washington that 10 years ago they switched how they reported other, and they pulled it from the African-American community.
Wow.
So when you see that 21% over there, that 21% is mostly blacks too. Mm-hmm. And even if you were to just take just a portion of it, say 15 and move it over, that real number would show up as 69%
right.
over in District of Columbia.
Well, Johnny,
so they made those changes, but even with those changes, this stuff is some bad news, man.
Well, you looked at this.
Looking at the report and looking at other things surrounding the report, you know, we from our efforts over the past several years, we've seen clinics shutting down at record pace. We've seen where abortions are actually going down for other groups of demographics. But even with that success, we're seeing those numbers are continuing to trend upward in the minority and the black community. And there has to be a reason for that. And that point was made very clearly in MAFA 21.
Right. We're
being targeted by Planned Parenthood and the abortion cartel. They are targeting black and minorities. Their facilities are being placed within walking distance of our communities.
And we proved that in the report that we put together here, showing the zip codes of where all the abortion clinics and birth control and Planned Parenthood facilities are located.
Right. Online we have the racial targeting control, population control report. And when we brought this information out, one of the things they said is, no, we're in these communities to address the issue, the needs. They don't have the resources to be able to address their needs. Well, the point that you've continued to make is that if you're there and you're pouring your resources into these communities, then the results that we should see is that these abortions and unplanned pregnancies should trend in a downward direction. But according to this information, we're seeing the exact opposite of that happen. And so that's just only reiterating the point that we made the whole time.
Right. They got a table 14. That's going to be on page 33 of this report. And that thing distinctly shows that in 2001, they reporting blacks at 37%, whites at 54%. But by the time you get 2010, blacks had gone up to 41%, and whites had dropped down to 50%. And this is when Leroy brings the report up, that's a strong point. This thing going in the wrong direction, but it's going in the wrong direction precisely because of, Mark, what you put out there some time ago, where they are putting these abortion clinics. That's what count the most.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're being targeted. Hey, Walter, you travel around the country a lot. You see this when you go to these abortion clinics, when you stand out in front? Because I've had people tell me, Johnny mentioned Washington, D.C. I've had people that have commented on MAFA saying, it's not 37%. We stand in front of this abortion clinic for days on end. We don't see anything other than blacks going in. Do you see that sort of thing, Walter?
Oh, absolutely. In Oakland, California, I was out on Tuesday morning, and we were out there for just about 1 hour in front of a abortion clinic. And within 1 hour, we counted 27 black clients going into an abortion clinic with just 1 hour. And it was impossible for them to service that many people in 1 hour. But that just shows to show you how many and the real percentages of those going into abortion clinics around the country.
You know, another thing also, Planned Parenthood says we're here and we're providing option. Abortion is only 3% of what we do. If these facilities are there with these resources to bring all of the different options there, out of those 27 people that you counted, they should have left out empowered with more options. But I'm willing to bet the majority of those in the high, maybe 90, close to 99% of them probably had an abortion. Right. And so again, that's telling us that these people are going here to get these services, but they're getting abortions at the end of the day. So Planned Parenthood is not providing them all of these solutions that they claim to be providing.
Well, they're targeting the minority community. And it's successful. If you look at the stats here, of the 14 top reporting areas that have the most minority number of abortions, 9 of them are in the South. Mm-hmm. That plays into exactly what you said in MAFA 21. You said lynching is for amateurs, because Planned Parenthood is doing it right. They're targeting minority communities, and that's why the numbers of abortions in the minority community is going up. That's why they put their abortion clinics in minority communities. Look, in Mississippi, 73% of all the abortions are done on the African American community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, how horrible is that?
The CDC has said 71% in Mississippi, but how many abortion clinics do they have in Mississippi?
1.
Wow.
1.
Yeah.
Could I ask Walter and Johnny a question? Now, all of you know Alveda King, of course, and she heads up the African American outreach for us at Priests for Life, and she's always taken statistics like this and talking to influential leaders in the black community, cultural leaders, political leaders, religious leaders. Now, Johnny and Walter, I know you talk to these people too, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately. Is this having an impact on them? Are they being moved by these statistics and this concrete evidence to say, hey, maybe abortion and supporting it is not such a great idea?
Walter, you want to go first?
Yeah, let me go. When I'm talking to the leaders, they're not necessarily moved by the numbers, and there are reasons why. The number one reason, though, there's 4 reasons altogether, but the number one reason is that the fellas are post-abortive themselves. They're in need of some serious healing. There's been an abortion in their life, in their family, in their marriage, in their congregation, and in some cases, the very worst case scenario is that it was their girlfriend in the back of the choir. And so we're talking about a whole new ball game. We talk about black leaders.
That's a sad situation, Walter. And, we talked about this at the very beginning of MAFA 21 project. We encountered a situation, as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, it was in Mississippi. I think Johnny was involved with it too, where we encountered that very thing where some leaders down there were trying to get some black pastors to get on board, and they couldn't get them on board. And one of the things they discovered is that these guys had a history of having sexual relationships with women in their congregations, and probably that resulted in abortions, and so they're not going to get on board. Do you remember that, Johnny or Walter?
Yes, but and it's not just there, but the anecdote goes all even here in North Carolina. We had a real success story the other month because a young lady decided to keep her child, but she was a youth director at a church, and the assistant pastor is the one that got her pregnant, and wanted her to get the abortion. So in the bad part about it, we found places where literally the person taking these young ladies to get an abortion was somebody from the church. And anytime you got the church messed up with Jezebel, we have a problem on our hands.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Right. But I tell you what is happening. I had some visitors coming down through North Carolina. There is a small wake up that's happening, and it can be like Walter said. Whatever the pro-life movement need to do right now, they really need to work with blacks on this thing. Now, blacks are going to do things totally different. Mark, you already know it. But nobody has worked with the black community like Life Dynamics have. And Life Dynamics has been 100% solid. The information they put out, they put weapons in our hands that's going to be good for this year. I'm talking about the 2014 now. This thing, we got enough information now to bring abortion to an end. It's already been 40 years. Now, this is the 41st year. They only spent 40 years in the wilderness of sin. Now, after 41st, you won't be coming out of this mess.
Right, that's right.
Preach it, brother.
I agree with Johnny. My reason for coming into the pro-life movement was, Marfa 21 and some things that Life Dynamics has done. And so I agree 100%. What Life Dynamic does is draw into the movement a vast, diverse group of individuals.
Absolutely.
But another thing that I think that we also need to point out here with this situation is that the same thing that's motivating action on their side is the same thing that's motivating inaction on our side. The thing that's motivating them to target blacks is race and color. And I think the thing that's keeping us from acting on this is race and color. We're committed to blacks. We saw that with the election of the president. A lot of us don't agree with his policies, but because of his color, we agree. NAACP, they do things that are not, it's counterproductive to the black community, but they have overwhelming black support. And I think color is causing us to not take action and respond appropriately to these numbers, just like color is causing the other side to target us.
Well, let's make sure people understand here in our audience. You're not an Obama supporter.
No, absolutely not. But the reason I feel like we're not seeing a huge uproar and outcry from the black community over these alarming numbers is because if we were to do that, that means that we're committing to this so-called all-white GOP, old racist party, but we're forsaking the brothers, you see. And I think that is something that's hindering, the appropriate response to this. Where on the other side, when they see race, they see that as an opportunity to target a whole group.
All right,
of
let me give you
individuals.
a theory about this. I've had about this situation, and I think I've kind of touched on this with Johnny before, and I'll ask Johnny and Walter if they agree with this. We have made tremendous inroads already in the black community. When we started MAFA, we thought we were going to put out 10,000 DVDs. We thought that would be a successful conclusion of the MAFA 21 project. So far, we've put out over 125,000. That doesn't count all the ones that have been bootlegged. That doesn't count all the ones that have just been duped and given to other people. That doesn't count all the showings that we've had in the public. We're still selling them. We're still putting them out. We're still having showings. So the impact of this thing continues to grow. But I think that it has been hindered because of basically what you're saying because of Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. All right. In a few years, he's going to be gone. Mm-hmm. And let's say that the next person that becomes president of the United States is not black. Let's just assume that for a moment, right? I think MAFA is going to take off again right then because you're not going to have that color dynamic that you have now.
Not only that, but I want to tell you what's happening. I had a visit from a couple of my interns from years ago. They are lawyers now, and they were sharing with me some of the things they have actually seen and done. For instance, in one of the states, the Planned Parenthood actually hires blacks to go out and do their recruiting in the community. And they ran across a couple of my former interns, and they told me about each time what happened. The first thing they ask the person, they let the person talk and tell good about good Planned Parenthood and get their service and want to hand their service out so the black community can get their health service and all that kind of stuff. They said, we asked them one question. Well, have you ever heard of Margaret Sanger? And sometimes these blacks will say, well, no, I haven't heard of Negro Project. And even if they explain Margaret Sanger Negro Project, they said not only did the person have shame, but one of the guys got so mad that when the whites who was off in a distance watching him as he was talking to him came and confronted him, he was fired up with them. So the word hasn't gotten out yet. That's the problem. And Planned Parenthood is trying to back down off of this thing and not let people know what's going down. They're acting. Planned Parenthood, if you notice what they've done, they've gone on the offensive. And the reason they're on the offensive is because they have no defense when it comes to the truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But Walter, have you seen that? I mean, what do you think about my theory?
I think you're absolutely on target, and I'm not so sure we have to wait until he's out of office. I'm getting more requests now as we begin to see the fruit of some of his policies. Some of the stuff is just not working. And so, in January, I've got a black pastor in San Francisco for the very first time is going to check into the pro-life movement. Now, he's in San Francisco, and he's never heard of the Walk for Life West Coast. He's been that disconnected from the pro-life movement. Well, I'm going to be with him in January. We're going to be doing my Alpha 21 screening at his church. And yes, already we're starting to hear more requests for this type of information.
Amen. And don't forget what Walter just said. This might not be a time you got to wait. The Teflon has worn off. The Teflon has worn off. And once but then Nelson Mandela at that funeral, the Teflon is going off more than people know it has.
Oh, yeah. Well, as we say here, the bloom's off the rose, right?
Amen.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for joining us.
God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you,
right,
everyone.
guys.
Love you all.
You too.
You take care.
You know, Mark, I know we're out of time here, but I've always said that movements are built through addition and multiplication,
right,
not division and subtraction. And one thing that MAFA 21 has done is brought more people into the pro-life movement than I've seen in 20 years.
You go to the march. I think I told y'all, my friend John Jakubczyk in Arizona called me this last January. I was home watching television and hit the phone ring, and it was him. And he said, I had to tell you, he said, I just got back from the March for Life. He'd been to him for 30-something years in a row.
Yeah.
And he said, he said, in years past, you could have looked out into the field of hundreds of thousands of people there, and you could have counted on one hand the number of blacks. He said, this year, they were everywhere. And he said, a bunch of them are carrying my Alpha 21s around in their hands and giving them to other people. They're carrying your little report around about where all the clinics are located. They're carrying the Planned Parenthood brochures and giving them around. And so we know we're making an impact, but I think we're being held up by Obama. But we keep plugging away, and when he's gone, I think the Alpha 21 thing is going to flood again once he's out of the picture.
Oh, good.
Well, I remember growing up in my neighborhood, a white guy with blue eyes showing up with a hood, a white hood. That was never a problem. That was never a fear of mine. That was never a concern. It was my brother next door who was out to get me and not be. And I think what's happening is that now more blacks are starting to see Obama for who he is. This guy's a true threat. I think that love affair is kind of wearing off, and now we can really respond to the facts in the data here.
Right. That's right.